Hello everyone and welcome to this learning about Legends fish train here on the Day of Legends. That is the day in which all 30 legendary fish in Final Fantasy XIV are available within about 20, I think it's 28 hours, which we do not see very often. And so I thought it would be a fun time to talk about legendary fish strategies. This is a time when a lot of fish, or this is a type of fish that a lot of people get hung up on, and they're not necessarily harder or easier, but they do have sometimes come with a little bit of intricacy with them. So I thought I'd do this little stream. We're going to be building up in complexity of fish, not necessarily in difficulty, but we are going to be building up in complexity. And so that's kind of what we're going to be doing. So we're going to be starting actually first with golden pipra. This is not a legendary fish. This is just a normal straight catch fish. But it is the closest analog that is actually up right now to a legendary fish, and thus why we're here. So with straight catch fish, this means it is a fish that cannot, or that is only caught without mooching. You do not need to use any other fish. You just literally catch it straight off the bat. And so what the main thing around these straight catch fish is optimizing the amount of casts that you can get per window. And this is going to be a running theme throughout the rest of the night here, where legendary fish are all about optimizing the amount of chances you have for that fish to bite. So the most basic thing that we can do is with straight catch fish, and what we want to do is catch the most common fish, use surface slap, and then chum, and then we actually wait until the window opens because we want our GP to regenerate. We want to make sure that we have the most amount of GP available during the window before we move on. So for fish like, say, golden pipra, which again isn't a legendary fish, but this would work for fish like Lopaceris elegans, Aelid scon, I'm sorry for terrorizing everybody with that, and Fricacata, what you would do is you would need to know what the most common fish is. And usually you can figure that out after just casting out like 5-6 times and figuring out which fish bites the most. But in this particular case, I know that there's only 3 fish in this fishing hole. We have, 3 fish in this fishing hole. There's 3 fish on this bait, and that is the clabow, the yellow pipra, and the golden pipra. These 3 other fish are actually from the relics, so they're not going to bite. Now, what I'll do is this is basically how you would prep ahead of time. You would cast out, you would catch whatever the most common biting fish is. In this case, it's either going to be a clabow or a yellow pipra because they just roughly have the same amount of bite rate in this case. And then I'll just use surface slap, and I will use chum, and that is it. That is how you would prep for a straight catch fish. Now, if it is a bit of a longer window, you would want to show up early and use Patience 2 to get Angler's Art stacks. For these short window fish, golden pipra, I mean, not just legendary fish, but like fingers, golden pipra, Jaws of the Undeath, and then even Fricacata and Aelid scon, your GP isn't going to run out. Your GP won't run out, especially with a cordial, by the time you hit like the end of the window. So you don't really need to worry about building up those extra stacks. But if it is a longer window, then you absolutely should build up those Angler's Art stacks ahead of time because that's just 450 GP that you can use during the window that you wouldn't be able to use otherwise. So with this upcoming window, what we're doing is we're just making sure that our GP is being built up. And let me double check my notes to make sure I have everything that I need. Cool. So now we're only, just a few minutes away from the window here. So I want to talk about what you would actually do in a straight catch fish window. And when I mentioned earlier about optimizing that amount of casts that you get per window, which means you're optimizing and maximizing the amount of times that fish that you want has a chance to bite. You're going to be heavily utilizing this new skill from Dawn Trail. It's level 1. It might not even have been added to your bar, but it is called Rest. Now, Rest, as you can see, it says it abandons fishing but keeps your equipment at the ready. This is a really fancy way of saying if a fish bites and you use Rest, you just don't reel in that fish. You don't have to wait. You don't need to do anything. You just go, oh, that's not the bite I want. Rest, go back in, and you can immediately start to use chum or cast back out. So instead of having to wait 3 seconds for a fish to stop biting, which is what you would have done in Endwalker and Shadowbringers or even before that, now you can just hit rest, move on. This also preserves, by not reeling in a fish, buffs like Surface Slap or Prize Catch will remain. Those will not fall off. So when you're going for a straight catch fish, you only want to attempt to hook the fish that you know or you are pretty confident is going to be the one you want. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that. The first way to know is what's its bite strength. We know that Golden Pipra is going to be a ferocious bite. That's 3 exclamation points. We also would look at the time. Now, in some cases, some fish bite within a certain time period, say 15 seconds after cast to 25 seconds after cast. And so we know that if we get a ferocious bite within that time, it is likely to be Golden Pipra. Now, in this particular case, I know that Golden Pipra is a little bit of a shorter bite than that, but it is also the only ferocious bite that we are going to see. So if I get a ferocious bite, I will attempt to use hook because that means that I am likely that I know that that is going to be Golden Pipra. The other thing to know is with that timing is what's that upper range. If that upper range is short and you know that there's more fish that are being likely to bite past that time, once you've left that time window of that fish actually biting, you can go, this fish isn't going to bite anymore. I'm not going to waste another 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds for a fish I know isn't going to be what I need. So you can use rest, reel back in, and cast back out. Now, Phoenix Felicius from Lamia is asking in chat here, will Ambitious Lure help? At Golden Pipra, it actually can. Golden Pipra is the only powerful hook set fish in this fishing hole, and I'll talk about the lures in a little bit when we get to Ruby Dragon. But yes, using Ambitious Lure does make it more likely that a powerful hook set fish will bite, which Golden Pipra is. So we have about another 30 seconds or so until this, about 35 seconds until this window opens, and then I'll actually demonstrate how this will actually work. So again, to repeat what I'll be doing, I will be casting out. I have already prepped a slap I already have chum. My GP is at max, which is great. This is exactly what we want. So moving forward into the window, I will cast out. I will wait until about, in this case, probably around 6 or 7 seconds. And if I don't have a bite, I am just going to reel back in. So I'll cast out and I will wait and see what the bite is. It's not a ferocious bite, so I use rest. I'll use chum and I'll cast back out. And that's basically it. That is what I will be doing for the next 3 minutes. But if you are level 100, what you can do is you can utilize Ambitious Lure. So if I use Ambitious Lure 3 times, or until I see a message here in the middle that says you have a feeling your next cast will be a large-jawed fish, if I use Ambitious Lure, then I increase the likelihood of Golden Pipra biting because it is the only powerful hookset fish, and Ambitious Lure impacts powerful hookset fish. Now, I know Golden Pipra is a bit of a rare fish, I say as I catch it, but because I know that that is the only first bite, I am very confident that I can reel that in and I can catch Golden Pipra. So kind of as a recap point here, now that I've caught it, basically if I wanted to go for another one for whatever reason, and we will do this again in the future, what you'll do is you basically just repeat the steps that you did in prep, but now you're going to have to be doing it with less GP. So one of the things that you'll have to keep in mind, and we'll again talk about this when we get to Ruby Dragon, is you want to keep your GP levels in mind, knowing, hey, I might have to use Surface Slap again, so I need to make sure I have at least 200 GP to use Surface Slap. And this is where having cordials and pre getting Angler's Art stacks helps. Now, the fact that I have caught Golden Pipra twice in a single window is kind of ridiculous. Many people will go multiple windows without it biting. I don't know why all of a sudden that happens, but yes, there you go. Simply just catch the fish. But no, not really how that works. But it is kind of what the hell is happening here that I got 3 bites in a row. I didn't plan for this. So anyways, but that is how straight catch fish will typically work in terms of actual strategies, is you really just want to make sure that you're optimizing the time that you have to give that fish a chance to bite. Now, I am saying to the folks who are here that if they want to use fish eyes to get a few more attempts in, they are more than welcome to, but that is only going to work on this one fish because fish eyes does not work on legendary fish. So you wouldn't be able to extend a window for a legendary fish technically with just using fish eyes. It doesn't really work that way. You would actually have to catch it during the window. There are some exceptions, and that gets a little bit weird, but we can talk about those in a little bit. All right, so this next fish we are going to go to is Helicoprion, which is in Thanalan at Forgotten Springs, where I'm going. Now, this fish is up in about 25 minutes or so, so we are going to take our time as we explain what exactly needs to happen. And I want to give everybody enough time to really prep here and ask questions if they have it. So, not a huge rush on this one. I also just realized that I am in need of something. So I will be right back. I apologize for that. I spent all this time this week getting my whiteboard set up for this stream and forgot to actually plug it in. And we're going to need that in a little bit. So Helicoprion, for those who aren't aware of what type of fish this is a legendary fish. It was one of the first legendary fish added during A Realm Reborn, and it is part of the quest A Feast of Famine. Now, this is a quest that is very unique in that it is the only fishing quest of its type, unfortunately, in the game. But it is also one of those legendary fish that a lot of people have some trouble with. It is kind of rare. It is a bit of a tricky little fish. But it is something that is very good at explaining how to handle mooch fish because Helicoprion is caught off of a mooch. So the prep for this fish is pretty much we're going to use Patience 2 to build up our Angler's Art stacks, and while we do that, we're also going to use Spareful Hand to store any Storm Riders we get. Now, Spareful Hand is a skill that only allows you to store a fish if it is large size, but that synergizes well with Patience 2, and I recommend doing building your Angler's Art stacks at the same time as pocketing fish, as I like to call them, or storing fish with Spareful Hand as much as I actually can. It just saves you a bunch of time. And while I get my whiteboard set up, I will get us started. When I say started, I mean I get us mooching here as well. So we'll be using Sand Leech for this guy. And what we'll start with is Patience 2. And we're going to be reeling in strong bites, either the 2 exclamation points and specifically ones before 16 seconds. Now, this could be a Storm Rider, it could be a Dustfish, or it can be a Desert Bream. But because we're just building Angler's Art stacks, we don't really care too much. We just want to make sure that we eventually get them. So I got one there on the first time. I'll use Spareful Hand to store the fish, and then we can kind of just move on from there. Sorry, my wife had just got home, so I had to talk to her for a second. So basically, let me just double check and make sure that my whiteboard here is working. Everyone can say hi to Mrs. Snacks. Okay, well that's off center. Did that change? It did. Just gonna slide you around a little bit. I apologize. I should have had this fixed before I got started, and I totally didn't. I should have checked to make sure that it was working. So basically, though, that's what we're going to. So while we are building up our Angler's Art stacks, we're going to also be storing the Storm Rider. I know I already missed one. One neat little tip here is typically your GP will regenerate as long as you are not doing anything else except catch fish and not using chum. Your GP will actually regenerate to roughly about what you would need to use Patience 2 again. Neat little fact, neat little way of how that works. Just double check and make sure that that is working. It is not. What is wrong here? Hmm. You want to bet that is because this is not updating. There we go. Ta-da. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. As I got to make sure that that was working. Cool. All right. All right. So here we are at Helicoprion, and we are working on building up our Angler's Art stacks, and we are gathering swim bait. And what we'll end up doing in about, say, I think it's about 15 minutes. So we have plenty of time here. In about 15 minutes, we are going to open the window by first using all of our stored swim bait. So all these guys down here, we are going to use as quickly as possible, basically. And that will basically guarantee us 3 to 4 quote unquote free mooches right at the start, which is great. This is something that we haven't really been able to see before in previous games, because at most we would be able to hold on to just one fish. Now I've totally accidentally caught and stored a sandfish here, so what I can do is just cast out and that'll wipe it away from me. Everything's back to working though, so now we are good to go. All right, so just because I'm at 3 Storm Riders doesn't necessarily mean that I am going to be done with prep, because you can actually hold a Mooch using just the skill Mooch. Now, there's a difference between Mooch and Mooch 2. Mooch itself has no cooldown, and it doesn't have a timer. This means that as long as we catch a large size fish, we can just hold on. Nope, that's not in the right place. We can just hold on to that fish as long as we're in this stance right here, you can just hold on to that mooch and then mooch it right when the window starts. It'll be perfectly fine. Now, this is different from how Mooch 2 works, where this one does actually have a cooldown, and it does have a timer of about 15 seconds. So if you catch a average sized fish, then you have 15 seconds to mooch it. But if you catch a large sized fish, you can just hold on to it for however long, because that is the difference between Mooch and Mooch 2. Large sized fish are mooched with Mooch. It's a lot of mooching there. Average sized fish are mooched with Mooch 2. Now, Ilya is asking, can we prep an identical cast on a Storm Rider to hold one before the window? That is the other way of doing it. If you had caught a Storm Rider, what you can do is you can use Spareful Hand. And if you then use Spareful Hand and then Identical Cast, you can actually store the fish that you just caught and just hold on to it as if normal, and then you can catch it right before the window and cast out. Or you can just use prize catch, cast out, and then hold it normally like I was explaining. So hello, Ku and Zin. So we have about 12 minutes until this window opens, and I want to explain something that we're only going to really use once, but I want to make sure that I explain what I was just saying to Ilya here. With the new edition, I'm sorry for that watermark too, with this new kit that we got with Dawn Trail, we got Spareful Hand. I was just talking about that. And also, while we do this, I'm going to work on getting that last Storm Rider that I need. With Spareful Hand, as I mentioned, we can store moochable fish. That's great. But if you notice with the Spareful Hand description, it says it cannot be executed while under the effects of, down a little bit more, I'm still getting used to this, under the effects of Surface Slap for Identical Cast. So there's this neat little quirk that we can utilize where if you use Spareful Hand first and then use Identical Cast, you can actually get another fish. You can use Spareful Hand on the next fish that you catch. This is useful on fish, I guess kind of like Helicoprion would probably be good on. You can use it on sidereal whale. You can use it on any fish that has a moochable fish, specifically legendary fish that really has like a rare mooch. Takatoa from this latest patch is a great example of using this synergy here because the trout that you need to actually mooch, the Nicawirpi trout, is not like super common, but it's just rare enough that this becomes a bit more beneficial. So if you use this technique of using Spareful Hand into Identical Cast, catching another one, and then using Spareful Hand, you can get basically 2 for 1 catch. And that's really efficient because you can now, for the cost of 350 GP, basically get 2 extra casts per window. And again, talking about optimizing your time for how many chances that legendary fish has to bite. you can really utilize that and really increase your numbers. I use this technique on sidereal whale, and at the end of Endwalker, I think we were saying if you can average about 5 to 8 in Endwalker, 5 to 8 event horizons, that was a pretty good window. With Dawn Trail, using this technique, I'm now getting on average 13 to 15 horizon events with good GP management per 12-minute window. But that's because I'm able to use identical cast after I catch one to actually go and grab a second one and storing both of those at the same time. Plus, on top of the fact that I'm able to store 4 of them ahead of the window actually starting. So that is a really, really handy trick and really, really useful to be able to master. Is being able to make those mooches really go as long as they can, and that's just another way that we can actually do that. Yeah, as Teodo is saying in chat right now, getting 10 was like the best you can do, but now the fact that, I mean, getting 10 now, if you aren't getting at least 10 mooches off Horizon event, you either are in an incredibly unlucky window or something is wrong. That point it becomes a are you actually fishing correctly question. Now I'm explaining to those in game right now exactly what we're kind of expecting for when the window opens, but the to kind of reiterate what we'll be doing when this window opens here in just about 6 minutes. It will turn when the weather turns here at 16 minutes past, or at, 16 minutes past the hour, excuse me, at 1600 hours Eorzea time. What I'll do is I will use this first stored mooch that I have. I will cast out with that, and we will see if we get a Helicoprion bite. It is a ferocious bite, so I will reel in any of those that I get. If nothing but if I get a strong bite or anything else that isn't ferocious, I will use rest, and then I will select the next Storm Rider in that I have stored. I will then be able to use Chum because you cannot use Chum on standard mooches because that will cancel the opportunity. So if I got time, I could do this. So if I use Chum here, you'll see that my Spareful Hand and my Mooch will go away because I have just canceled the ability for that to happen. That is what canceling a Mooch what canceling a Mooch opportunity does. It doesn't let you Mooch. A lot of skills do this. Chum, Prize Catch, Patience, Patience, and Patience 2, Surface Slap, obviously, Identical Cast. But not Makeshift Bait, which we will use in a bit. But that is what you want to avoid doing before you use that first stored mooch. Now I'm going to quickly get that other Storm Rider back. So again, when the window opens at 16:01 specifically, I will do this. Mainly because if I do it any other time. If you do it any sooner, you run into the chance of server ticks kicking in. But we typically recommend that if you're going to cast out, you do so at, if I remember to use a new layer here, if you are looking at a window, we typically recommend that you cast out at least 1 minute after the window. So for Helicoprion, which its window starts at 1600, I'm going to cast out at 1601, because if I cast out at 1600, due to the connection that we have with the server, and because fishing is technically server side, we can't tell which fish is going to bite. The server knows, client doesn't. There is that latency. There is that conversation that happens between the client and the server. And so if you cast out here, there is a chance that the bite will not register in the window. So we typically, on average ping, recommend that you cast out at 1 minute past when the window opens. Now, there has been some instances where people have been consistently not seeing that, or at least seeing that work. The one that stands out is the Greater Serpent of Ronka. For some odd reason, its window opens at 10, right? Technically, Priest's window opens at 10, excuse me. So if you have an Uriops and you cast out at, say, 10:01, sometimes for some people that we haven't fully understood why yet, this doesn't count. This will say nothing bites, even though you're expecting a priest. It sometimes doesn't occur, or it doesn't seem to work sometimes until like 10:03. I think that was like the earliest of the quote unquote broken times that we have found so far, but we haven't figured out why that happens. So just a fair warning, if you are going for Greater Serpent of Ronka, maybe wait a couple of extra seconds here. That's about 10 seconds into the window. It's unfortunate, but it is worth waiting 10 seconds than waiting 16 to find out that nothing bit. So be careful with those times. But general rule, though, for the most part, 1 minute after, you're good to go. Now, when the window is closing, we say you need to make sure that that cast is out 1 minute before the window closes. So if say, Helicoprion's window ends at midnight, or at, say, 20, which is actually when it will end, you want to make sure that your final mooch is casted out at 5:59 or 19:59, because when you cast and when you hit cast, it will look at the time and it will go, okay, what are the fish that could bite at this time? And it'll go, oh, that's the Helicoprion window. Helicoprion could bite. But if you cast out at 20, it'll go, nope, that's not the right window anymore. So making sure that you can throw that last cast out, and I highly recommend with all the legendary fish, you are casting out as much as you can. Even if you think you're going to miss it, go for it anyways, because you might get lucky with like a server tick or something like that. I have in the past. It's really saved me. It's how I caught my Cinder Surprise. So highly, highly recommend doing that. But knowing when the times are is very good and very important. All right, so now that the window's open, I am going to mooch that first Storm Rider that I caught, that I've had stored with Mooch. And I'm just going to wait and see what bites. Unlike with Golden Pipra, sometimes these fish, sometimes the mooch fish will be the longest bite, so you really just got to write it out and see what happens. I got a ferocious bite. I attempted to use hook. Didn't stick. Helicoprion does that to you. But what I'll do next is I will now use chum. I'll use a storm rider, and I will cast out. If you are ever capped on GP, that means you're at max GP. Highly recommend using chum, and if you can't use chum, use prize catch. And if you can't use either of those for whatever reason, use one of them anyways. Like, really, you want to make sure that you're utilizing your GP as much as possible. So I'm just going to go through. This is kind of the opener for Helicoprion, is you want to go through and just use up all of the Storm Riders that you got. And if you ever get a ferocious bite, try and reel it in. If you don't, use rest. Don't be like me, who's talking and totally misread what had happened, and reel in a strong bite. Only reel in those ferocious bites. We have Tomo already getting one of these. That's great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cast out. I'm all out of my Storm Riders, but I still have, 10 minutes left in this window. What I'm going to do is keep getting those Storm Riders, and I'm going to make sure that I'm only reeling in strong bites, the 2 exclamation points, before about 12, 13 seconds. And I'll utilize chum because my GP is getting a bit high. And now it's going to be down to about 6, 7 seconds. Because what chum will do is that it'll reduce the time it takes a fish to bite by half. So on those straight catch fish, like golden pipra, like furcicata, like Aelid scon, you absolutely are going to want to be using chum as much as possible, because that is going to basically increase the amount of bites that you're going to get per window. Depending on the nature of it, could be twice as many bites, which is great because that means you are twice as likely for that fish to actually bite. Now, my GP was running a bit high, and I know that because I have 10 Angler's Art stacks, I can be a little bit more generous with my GP here, but I'm still not going to blow through all of it just yet. What I'm going to do is just use chum until I'm about halfway done, or halfway through, so I'm down to about 500 for me because I have 1,000 max. And I get a Storm Rider, and I will go and I will mooch that one more. If I ever hit a point where I had it basically had a bite that started going for longer than 12 seconds, I know that Storm Rider is far less likely to bite. So at 12 seconds, I would use rest and I would cast back out. That's without chum. With chum, it would be about 6 or 7 seconds. Much like how it was with golden pipra, if I didn't have a bite, knowing that upper range of what that window is going to be for a fish to bite, and knowing that if I'm out of it, I'm not going to get the fish that I need, and just using rest can really help save time. So there, I got a ferocious bite. I ended up getting a Helicoprion. That's the second bite that I had this window, which is great. And we still have a few more minutes left, so I'm going to keep going through here because I wanted to show what you do when Mooch, when you get an average size Storm Rider. So assuming that that last Storm Rider that I got was average size, that means that I would have had to have used Mooch 2. Now, Mooch 2 has a 2-minute cooldown, which means I can't mooch an average-sized Storm Rider during that time. While Mooch 2 is on cooldown, I will end up using Makeshift Bait because I have at least 5 Angler's Art stacks to actually activate that skill. If I didn't have Makeshift Bait, I'd be using Patience 2 instead. But I'm going to use Makeshift Bait. Going to cast out. You'll notice it didn't cost me any GP whatsoever. And then I'm just going to carry on catching Storm Riders like I was before. Using Makeshift Bait to help with mooching is really, really handy on the longer window, like the longer window legendary fish, or just generally fish in like big fish in general. Because it does not cost GP, so you can just basically use this time to regenerate GP, or you can utilize chum instead. Uh, it's a really utilitarian skill for both managing GP and helping keep mooching more likely. Now I'm about to get another ferocious bite here because this is going long. And I am getting really lucky tonight. So when you are going for legendary fish, the really big thing that you want to be using is your GP as much as you can without necessarily prohibiting what you're going to be doing down the road. Now, I know that I'm pretty much free to just use my GP however I need at the moment because I know that I'll be able to use makeshift bait for at least another 40 seconds and Angler's Arts me with 5 Angler's Art stacks, I will be able to use another round of makeshift bait, which is going to be another like 2 minutes of mooching that I can use. So that means that I can be a little bit more generous with my GP. In with Helicoprion's case and with some fish, you might find that you're not using it all that often. So you just want to, if you don't feel too bad if you're not using your GP, but you definitely should be using your GP as much as you can because those are means that you are using skills that are going to help you speed up or make it easier to actually get opportunities to catch that fish. So I'm pretty high on my GP here. My makeshift, or my not my makeshift, my Mooch 2 is off of cooldown, so I'm able to basically, if I want to, I can use it again before using makeshift bait. So let's see if I can actually make that happen this time. And the cooldown for, like I was mentioning, the cooldown for Mooch 2 and the duration of makeshift bait line up so nicely that you can pretty much, once you use it, you have 3 minutes. Once you're done with this Mooch, you can just use makeshift bait, and you're pretty much good until Mooch 2 comes back up. It kind of syncs really well in that sense. And so what you might find is using, say, Patience 2 with just to maintain mooching and just using it whenever Mooch 2 is on cooldown. So Mooch 2 is on cooldown, I'll use makeshift bait, could have used Patience here. Now I will start being a little bit more careful with my GP because I know that when this is done, when this duration is up, I am going to have to use Patience. So I want to make sure that I have that. But if you've noticed this whole time, I've been able to keep up my mooching and not really necessarily stop and have to wait for GP because I prepped those 10 Angler's Art stacks ahead of time. I had a bunch of mooches stored to begin with, so I already could guarantee a few mooches at the start. Now that was a good case of fish was taking way too long to bite. I knew it wasn't going to be a storm rider, so I rested and I came back in and I recasted. Love the fact that we're seeing all these people getting their first big fish. I think that's always fun. How many Helicoprion was that? 3? Now, I will make this my last mooch, but you can already see how the time on makeshift bait is roughly lining up with my Mooch 2 timer. So I know that like whenever I'm done using a buff like Patience 2 or makeshift bait, I always make sure to throw in a Mooch 2 mooch if I can before using them again, because that just gives me that extra basically for 100 GP I can get a mooch and I don't have to use another precious resource like a bunch of GP with Patience 2 or some of my Angler's Art stacks with makeshift bait. Alrighty, we're going to move on to Ruby Dragon, which is up in about, technically Ruby Dragon's up in 23 minutes, but the fun begins in about 12. Now, for those who are not aware of the infamy of Ruby Dragon is at least pre-Cinder Surprise, pre-Shadowbringers, was considered the most difficult, most rare fish in the game. With Cinder Surprise now, I think that is up for question, but it definitely sits up in the throne room of truly legendary and difficult fish. And this is a fish that is going to take everything that we just learned about straight catch fish and mooching and ambitious lure and put that all into one actual one actual test. Now, I should probably move myself so everybody in game can actually hear me. So let me stand over in this corner here. Or in the front over here. And then we will get into explaining the Ruby Dragon. Ruby Dragon is pretty well documented when it comes to tips, tricks, and other optimizations, just due to its infamy. Basically, it's a fish that has a relatively low uptime and is still also quite rare. So it is this perfect storm of just things that make it hard to catch, and going back to that idea of optimizing and getting the maximum amount of time and options to actually get to actually have that or actually have that fish bite, the amount of opportunities for it is very low. So what we're going to do here is, just like with Helicoprion, we are going to use Patience 2, and we are just going to build Angler's Art stacks. Now, Ruby Dragon mooches into Ruby Dragon is mooched off of, a cure, the big fish here of the Ruby price, but it isn't available until midnight, and it will be available from midnight to 4 a.m. So I'm just going to start building up my Angler's Art stacks, but what I'm going to be keeping an eye on as I get towards 8 or 9 stacks is I'm going to look and see when I catch one of those coral eel snakes, because I want to surface slap that, which, if you recall from when we were going for golden pipra, we want to slap the most common biting fish when going after straight catch fish. Because Coeurl is a straight catch fish, we are going to slap coral eel snake, because that is the most common biting fish. And once we've done that, we'll use prize catch. We will then use chum, and we will just wait until the Coeurl window opens. Zin, thank you for the Prime sub. So I'm going to just keep going, and I'm going to keep using Patience Stew here to build up my Angler's Art stacks. This is absolutely critical for Ruby Dragon. There are a lot of fish where we'll say, yeah, get, Angler's Art stacks. It'll be okay. It'll help a little bit, or you don't really need it, like with Furcicata, with Aelid Scon, Fingers. Technically, even with Golden Pipra, you don't need 10 Angler's Art stacks. But in this particular case, it is absolutely crucial that you have it, because we'll be utilizing makeshift bait like we were using with Helicoprion to help maintain our Mooch loop. And I will explain that here in a brief minute. So, and you'll also notice when I was mentioning earlier that your GP regens just quick enough that if you use, if you're just using the hook sets, it'll regen enough that you'll be able to use Patience again. Now, a fun little trick too is you, depending on the fishing hole, but on average, you'll need about 2 Patience 2s, roughly 2 Patience 2 durations to get 10 Angler's Art stacks, which is about, as you can see, 290 seconds. So just under 5 minutes needed to get 10 Angler's Art stacks. So if you're planning like on time, or you're trying to see if you have enough time to actually prep for something, it's roughly about 4.5 to 5 minutes needed to get 10 Angler's Art stacks for most fishing holes. There's a handful of fishing holes with certain baits where you could actually do it in less than, you can get like 7 or 8 Angler's Art stacks in less than 3 minutes. I know that I do that when I'm prepping for sea butterfly. I will actually use Metal Spinner and Patience 2 at the blue window, which is right next to the Okazundu Aetheryte. I will use that, and I can get about 7 or 8 Angler's Art stacks in one duration of Patience 2. Now I have to be careful here because I'm using a macro, and I made this mistake earlier where I casted mid-macro. So I'm going to let that roll for a second. But basically what I'm explaining is what we're going to do at midnight. When midnight comes up, I know that that is the start of the Coeurl window. And what we're going to do is, ideally by then, we're going to have about 9 or 10 Angler's Art stacks. We're going to have a coral eel snake slapped, and we are going to have we're going to have chum if we can. What we'll do is we will cast out, and we will use Ambitious Lure 3 times. Now, by using Ambitious Lure, we make it more likely for the 2 other powerful hook set fish to actually bite. The one that we care about is Coeurl, because we have coral eel snake, which is the 3rd of the 3 powerful hookset fish biting will actually reduce that down to 2 and makes it a whole lot easier. So it's a really nice, because you can now use that plus prize catch plus spareful hand, and you can now store upwards of 2, 3, or even at most 4 cure during before the window even starts, which is 4 opportunities to start mooching. Now I am going to quickly grab that coral eel snake. The fact that there's also only 3 powerful hookset fish means that I can kind of force the coral eel snake to bite, because it is more likely to bite than glass herring. So watch me get a glass herring. And with that, I can kind of just force it ahead of time. So I'll use chum, slap, prize catch, and high cordial. A neat little thing also when you're thinking about time and you're thinking about optimizing your resources, a high cordial goes on cooldown, as you can see, for about 3 minutes, which is roughly 1 Eorze an hour. So you can totally just use that to determine whether or not you have enough time to get another cordial in or not. Now I'm just preparing some, believe it or not, slides. But as the window opens up here, we are going to cast out, and I'm going to use Ambitious Lure 3 times. And whenever I get a Ferocious Bite, which is going to be our cure, I will attempt to reel it in with hook. If I don't get a Ferocious Bite, I just use Rest, I use Chum, I cast back out, I use Ambitious Lure again. Now, this is a new strategy that came with Dawn Trail, partially because it gave us Spareful Hand and Ambitious Lure, but you are now basically going to be constantly fishing from midnight until the end of the Ruby Dragon window at this point. Now, Cure is slippery, so it is likely to slip on you, but if it didn't, I would have used Spareful Hand to store it. So I'm just going to keep going, and this is where some GP management skills start becoming really handy, knowing how much GP you have. You don't want to be spending Angler's Art stacks in this first phase. You really want to make sure that you are only doing that. You want to make sure that you're spending your Angler's Art stacks during the Ruby phase. Apologize for the noise in the background. One trick that I've started measuring myself, especially like with cosmic exploration, where the lures are really handy on some missions, is figuring out how much GP I need to continually use a lure without necessarily having to wait for a cordial to come back. And I have found that roughly 200 GP is when I stop using chum and lure and only use lure on basically fish that require it. Now I got the you have a feeling your next cast will be a large jawed fish, so I stop using lure, because if I use it again, it will overwrite it. And I know that when I see that, it's going to absolutely be either that glass herring or that cure. Now, that was a cure. Because it is a big fish, I cannot use identical casts, so I just have to use Spareful Hand. And I'm right now back at where I started. We're going to cast out, and I'm just going to catch another coral eel snake. Probably what I should have done before I casted was use prize catch just in case that this was a cure. Something just to keep in mind when you are in a situation like this where you are needing to store fish or there's an opportunity that you need a large size fish or of a specific fish. Consider using prize catch, even if you aren't certain that fish is going to bite. Just on the off chance that it does, that maybe I did get two cure in a row, because my luck has been apparently crazy. That's just something to keep in mind. So we're back to where we were. I'm going to use my chum one last time because that would put me under 200 GP, which I was just saying is roughly where I want to be at when I just have to use lure. And at this point, because I'm under 200, I'm not going to use chum. I'm just going to use ambitious lure. Starting at around 2 a.m. Eorzean time, I want to start getting really, really, really careful with my GP because I want to have GP. I want to have at least half of my GP, so about 500 GP, going into the Ruby Dragon window that starts at 4. Now, if I was being more active with what my GP was, or like if I was being more active with my GP, 200 GP wouldn't have lasted me, but I'm pretty comfortable having something because I wanted to make sure that I had enough to also use Spareful Hand. So my Coeurl will come up. I'll have another one at 2:45 or so Eorzean time. But I'm going to not use too much of my GP, even though I know I'll be able to use it at least 2 or 3 more times before the Ruby window. Use a Coeurl. Take a quick break to pop a short macro. So what I'm saying with this phase, or with this macro, is you'll find that a lot of fish have phases. They have different like parts of how they end up, like their window could be broken down. So for example, with a that's the wrong button. So for example, with say Ruby Dragon, we technically have 3 different phases. We have the prep phase, and this is where we're getting the coral eel snake and the AA and the angler's art stacks. We have phase 2, which is the cure phase, which is where we're in it now, and this is where we're just storing them. And then the final phase is the actual Ruby Dragon phase. This is when Ruby is up. This is when we're going to be mooching our cures, and this is when really this is like the most important part of the entire stretch of this fish's window. So we'll be mooching and hopefully catching. So somebody in chat here is asking, what's a good average amount of cures to be getting before the window opens? And the answer to that is as many as you can get. There really isn't a number. It's not like, it's not like with the Horizon events where we can say, you should be getting between 13 and 14 mooches per window. That's not the case with this. This is literally you get as many as you can and you take whatever you get. Hopefully you get at least one. That is almost guaranteed you should get one, but because Cure is so slippery, it's very hard to predict. It's very hard to get a metric of how many you can get. So we have about 3 minutes. That'll be the last cordial I can use until the Ruby Dragon window. So I'm going to stop using my GP. I'm just going to let it accumulate. And we're going to talk about what's actually going to happen when the Ruby Dragon window opens at 4. So at 4:01, what will happen is, go back to my drawing board here. At 4:01, I am going to mooch a cure. I didn't use prize catch. That kind of stinks. So what will happen here is I can't actually do anything with it. So sorry, my cat's going crazy now. So what will happen at 4:01? I will mooch a cure, and it will either bite into a. Remember to use prize catch. It will either bite into another cure, or it'll bite into Ruby Dragon. So if it's a ferocious bite under 23 seconds, roughly, it is a cure, and if it's over 23 seconds and it's a ferocious bite, it's Ruby Dragon. Fair warning, both of these can slip. They will, and they will slip. But the fun thing with cures is, and just to save myself some time, I'm going to slap this glass herring. The fun thing with cures is you can mooch them into themselves. And this creates something that is called a mooch loop. Now, mooch loops are one of my favorite mechanics in the game. Basically, it means you get into a point where you're just in a cycle of catching and mooching a fish over and over and over again, just in a circle. And that's what basically why it's called a loop, because you're catching the same fish over and over again, and you have to make sure that you have enough GP to maintain that. You want that loop to go on as long as possible. And in order to do this, in order to maintain that loop as much as possible, I'll wait for my cordial here. We'll use makeshift bait. Now, makeshift bait, as I might have mentioned earlier, does not break mooch chains. So if I am in a point where I can mooch a cure, but say it's an average size cure that I caught, I can use makeshift bait, and whatever the next cure that I get is will be moochable. So we are going to end with 3 cure, and I'm just going to go straight into a mooch because the window has opened. I'm going to wait a second because I have to get this macro out. And that's basically what I was just explaining on this macro, is that cures will bite into 2 separate things. So I am going to wait a minute for my macro here to go out. Actually, I lied. I can totally just do this manually and not break the macro. Now, because I didn't use my caster, I don't know how much time this is, but it doesn't matter because I'm still going to be wanting to reel in this ferocious bite. Now it's another cure. This is a large size cure, so I'm not going to use makeshift bait. I am only ever going to use makeshift bait before mooching a mooch 2 or an average sized cure. And the chain breaks. Just because cures can slip, and that slip rate doesn't really change between whether you're catching it straight or off of a mooch, it is likely that your chain is going to break, which is why we store as many as we possibly can. Now, with this one, I can use chum. I might as well because my GP was starting to get high, and I know that I'm going to be using makeshift bait here in the future. I just need to make sure that I have enough to use prize catch and surface slap and chum. Now that's a very close to 23-second cure, so I'm assuming that that's going to be a cure and not actually a ruby dragon. Yep. And then I can just carry on once again and keep mooching. The one thing that's always disheartening is the late biting cures, which we've just passed. And there you go. That's how you catch the ruby dragon. I still have, this window doesn't close until 8 a.m. So I'm going to keep showing what will happen when you have to rebuild anyways. So I'm going to use up my last one. Also, congratulations to Artemis for getting that. I'm going to use up my last stored cure here anyways. She'll give me another cure. And because this one is average sized, I have 15 seconds to mooch it, but I'm going to use makeshift bait before mooching it. Because now, if I get another one, it will be, regardless of size, I'll be able to use mooch with it. So I'll just be able to continue that mooch chain. And this is why having 10 Angler's Art stacks is so important, is because you can keep this chain up for basically 5 minutes. And if you really wanted to be careful, the neat thing is makeshift bait works with spareful hand. So what you could do is you could use, if you've got that far, like your makeshift bait's running low and you don't have enough Angler's Art stacks, but you still have, say, 500, 600 GP, you can store that cure, that last cure, under the makeshift bait using spareful hand, use patience too, and then just keep going. And so you could technically, if you got lucky and the cure didn't slip, you could just keep mooching this cure for 5, 8, 10 minutes. That's really unlikely because it has like a 50% plus slip rate. But if you could, you can do that. And I have heard, I think like the record number of loops on a cure was like 15, I think, 15 or 16. Anyways, we're now out of all of our cures, so what we're going to do is we're just going to use our skills like we were basically prepping to catch a cure during that cure phase that I was talking about between midnight and 4 a.m. Except I won't use prize catch in this case because I still have makeshift bait. So I'm not going to waste that 200 GP just to catch something that I know I'm going to be able to mooch with anyways. I'll go ahead and cast out and mooch that one cure. And now I see that my this is a bit of an interesting spot because my makeshift bait just fell off. I can't necessarily use Mooch 2 immediately, but I know that I would be able to if I cast out. So here's this interesting thing. Instead of just using makeshift bait again, what I can do is I know that the next fish that I catch, the next cure, assuming I catch it, when I reel it in, it will be probably average size, which means I would have to use Mooch 2. I can just use Mooch 2 and then use makeshift bait before using that Mooch instead of just waiting, or instead of just using makeshift bait on that one first Mooch. I can get that, like, I can just keep going. I don't have to wait. So again, I'm about to use Mooch 2, so I will use makeshift bait just in case, and I'll cast out again. I'll cast out again with my Moochable cure. Oh no times 2 is saying that it bit and slipped. Ruby Dragon will do that to you more often than you would like. That is the one really annoying thing, is Ruby Dragon can slip. It has a lesser slip rate than Cure does, but for the most part, it can slip, and it's usually at the times when you don't want it to. The first time you've had a bite too, yeah, that's usually when you don't want it to. On my European ult, I had Ruby Dragon slip 3 times, I think, before catching it. And that was 3 times over the span of about, I want to say 20 windows. Which that in itself was pretty good that it bit, but it kind of sucked that it slipped 3 times. So we have 3 minutes left in this window. At this point, if you haven't used your GP, you're going to be using it as much as you can. So I'm going to be using Chum. I'm going to wait on that Cordial just in case I might not need it. But at this point, I'm going to be using Chum and Ambitious Lure as much as I possibly can in these final few minutes, because I know that I don't need to necessarily wait. I don't have to preserve my GP. This is literally the final stretch, and you give it your all in that final stretch. And usually, actually, not even usually, with legendary fish, you want to be blowing as much of that GP as you possibly can, when you know you don't really care if you have to have it after a certain amount of time. So in that, usually like in the final like 2 minutes is when you'll be using a lot. Q100 is asking, how much easier is it to catch Ruby now compared to before makeshift bait? Or do people just catch it way more often? That's a good question. Ruby Dragon, I don't think was necessarily any easier, but it is definitely a whole lot smoother now. Now, what I am going to do here is, I think, screw up a little bit. How much GP am I going to have by then? No, I have to wait. Okay. I'm going to wait here for a second just to use a patience 2. No, actually, I can just keep using price catch. This is a weird thing where I'm like trying to figure out how much GP I have with the 30 seconds I have left. But anyways, to answer your question, how much easier? It is not necessarily easier, but it is more consistent on being able to get mooches, which means that it is more likely that you are to get a bite more often. And you're not necessarily going to be waiting, I don't know, 10 windows between bites. You might get it now every 7. Those are arbitrary numbers, but just kind of to highlight a point. But I know that I'm not going to make that mooch, so we're going to end it there. All right, so kind of to recap everything on that. If you are ever stuck on a fish and you're like struggling at different parts of it and you really want to focus on optimizing, look at the different phases, seeing if there's actual phases like we were talking about here with Ruby Dragon, how there's like 3 different phases here. If you are, let me make this on someplace that you can see. If you are stuck on a phase, just focus on one. Maybe you focus on the cure phase and see how you can optimize this to make sure you can get as many cures stored as possible. And then maybe on another window, focus on how to manage your GP to be able to actually mooch as often and figuring out what you need to actually catch it. Think about fishing in that sense. It's kind of like a weird, like a raid. The fish is a raid boss, and you kind of have to figure out what is the optimal path, what skills should I be using, what's the rotation, quote unquote. I use that term lightly, but like what's kind of my rotation to make sure to optimize everything. All right, so our last fish is going to be one that is going to put everything that we just covered to the test. We are heading to As Is Law for Opabinia. Now, Opabinia has taken a beating, I think is probably the best way to put it. Opabinia has taken a bit of a beating over the past every expansion since it was added, because it seems like every time new skills are added, it is some sort of nerf to Opabinia. There is, it was like, Stormblood ended double hook, which made the getting the intuition a whole lot easier. Shadowbringers added surface slap and signature skyball, and then Endwalker, and now Dawn Trail has basically been like the death knell for Opabinia. So there is a ton of different ways of getting Opabinia, and we kind of have joked that Opabinia is like their test bed for new skills of like, how can we make Opabinia easier? How can we make this an easier fish to catch? So let me tell everybody where we are. Oops, helps if I use the right command. Have everyone show up here and while we wait. All right, so with Opabinia, it is an intuition fish that requires 3 functional proto-hopkins to catch. And basically what I want everyone to do, if you're either following along or maybe you're watching and you're in game, what I want everyone to do here is I want them to take everything that we've learned. I'm giving information now, and I'm going to bring it up on screen here in a second. And I want you to take everything that we've just learned and see if you can figure out the right steps for prepping. like, how are you going to get started with this fish, excuse me. I'm just writing something down here. Now, the one new thing that we haven't covered here is intuitions. Now, intuitions are a unique buff that you get when you catch certain fish in certain fishing hole. And so in this particular case, Opabinia requires 3 functional proto-hopkins. Picked a really bad color for this, didn't I? 3 functional proto-hopkins to trigger intuition. It is moochable off of platinum fish, which is a weak bite, and notably, the exclusive bite on signature skyball. So you have these 3 bits of information here. And actually, there's a 4th bit, which is Hopkin are the only strong bite on Fiendwormed. I know I'm missing some words there. So the question then, and this is kind of what I'm testing everybody on, is what's the process for this? What's the order of operations? How would you tackle this fish if you're given this specific bits of information? And so let's break it down. If we look at the phases, we obviously know that there's going to be mooching. Let me change my color here really quick. There's going to be mooching. And so we know that we want to prep 10 stacks, right? And we also want to probably store some platinum fish. Now, do you have to? No. But it helps a lot. Even though it is exclusively bite, I'm apologizing for that. I'm going to fix that watermark. Even though technically it is exclusive, the platinum fish, I should make that clear too. The platinum fish exclusively bite on signature skyball. We can still go ahead and store some platinum fish while we are building our angler's art stacks. And how that works, I'll let you decide yourself. Now, for the final thing is we have to think about, okay, if we have our prep, what's our actual like triggering going to look like? Words are hard. We know that we need 3 functional proto-hopkins. So, like I was mentioning earlier, we could probably just double hook or triple hook. Either will work. I will say double hook will give you the amount that you need. And then we know that it's also Hopkins are the only strong bite, which means powerful hook set, which means they respond to Ambitious Lure. And because of that, what we'll use is Ambitious Lure to actually get our Hopkins to actually bite. So let's go ahead and put that in practice. Let me also add that. Okay, so I'm going to switch to Fiendworm, and I am going to use. I'm just going to use 1 round of Patience 2, just to give me some Angler's Art stacks. Now, at this point, I could be using Ambitious Lure to bring in Hopkins, but I'm not. I'm not going to do that just yet because that's a little bit a little bit like next steps types of thing. Let's talk about just like the very simple, straightforward way of handling and breaking everything down into those small parts. First part, get some Angler's Art stacks and catch some platinum fish if we can. Like I said, it's not a huge deal if we don't, because we can get them exclusively on Signature Skyball. But just in case, if we get them, we'll store them. Technically, that was a Hropkin, because like I said, it is the only strong bite. But I'm going to reel it in anyways at this point just so I can get the stacks, but I typically wouldn't. I'll still double hook it in the end, just to get it because I wasn't actually expecting that to bite. So there's platinum fish. We'll go ahead and store that. We're almost at 5 Angler's Art stacks, which is great. Now, typically, Opabinia is one of those legendary fish now where you can show up early to prep, and it is definitely a fish that can benefit from some prep. But like the window that we're in right now, where it's like 40 minutes of thunderstorms, you really don't need to show up early at this point. You can just show up during the window as long as there's maybe 10-15 minutes left and still actually have a good amount of time to get it and have a high chance that you'll actually get Opabinia. Okay, so at this point, I have 5 Angler's Art stacks. I have a platinum fish. That'll be fine. I know from experience this will be more than enough. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use Chum. And like I mentioned, functional Proto-Hropkin is the only strong bite, meaning it's the only fish that will respond to powerful hook set, which means we can use Ambitious Lure and really draw it out. And I'll explain how Ambitious Lure works after this intuition. So I get the double hook, and I will reel in. I will only use double hook on that strong bite. That gives me exactly 3, and now I can go ahead and start mooching because Opabinia is caught off that mooch. So I'll just go ahead and use that, and it is not a ferocious bite, which is what Opabinia is, and so I will just ignore it. Now, because platinum fish bites exclusively on, or solely, not sure the best way to put that, but it's the only bite. It's the only fish that's going to bite on Signature Skyball at the flagship. I will switch to Signature Skyball, and I'll just start mooching. And I'm going to use Chum. I'm going to use my Angler's Art stacks, and I'm just going to basically try and get as many chums as I can, mooches as I can in that short window that I'm afforded during the intuition. Now, one thing that was added in Dawn Trail that I don't have a ton of information on yet is using this level 50 trait we got called Fisherman's Instinct. This is a trait called, Fisher's Instinct, which means while under the effects of Fisher's Intuition or Spearfisher's Intuition, the duration has a chance of resetting under certain conditions. That condition is whenever you catch a fish that has the ability to trigger that intuition in the first place. So what you can do on some fish is, maybe you do want to reel in a intuition triggering fish, like on sidereal whale. It's okay to maybe reel in a Philania because it might refresh that intuition for you, and that's a long chain. So if you get a Philania at like 2 minutes left on your intuition and it refreshes it, you get that intuition now for another 10 minutes, which in total means an 18-minute long intuition, assuming you don't, for whatever reason, however that might work, you don't refresh. So specifically when it comes to Opabinia, one thing to consider is reeling in those strong bites off of the Mooch because it has a chance to be a functional proto-Hropkin. And from some experience that I've had, switch back to Fiendworm. Now that we're off our intuition, I'm going to basically just do what I just did. We're going to go back to phase 1 of triggering intuition. From some early data that I have found is functional proto-Hropkin has a very good chance of refreshing intuition. Is it guaranteed? No. But it's one of those where I'm like, maybe it might be worth it to reel it in to try and refresh that intuition. It might be worth that time because we can guarantee the mooches off of Signature Skyball. We can even have some stored if we had to. Maybe we should give that a shot. So something to consider when going for legendary fish that have intuition is, should I be trying to bring in the fish that'll actually potentially refresh that intuition? You'll find that right now the answer is probably not all of them. On some fish, like say sea butterfly, with sea butterfly you need scorpion flies and you need sky fairies. For those, you're not going to be naturally catching those while going for sea butterfly, so it is not worth going for that refresh. On some fish like Charbonnet or Hyphlosaurus, the intuition fish are also the fish that you're going to be mooching. So like ice fairies for Charbonnet or Ascus for Hyphlosaurus. Those are fish that you're just naturally going to be catching, and so if you catch like a intuition refresh, great, sweet, go for it. That'll just be really nice, but you don't necessarily have to like work towards it. For fish though, like Opabinia, where you could potentially choose to reel in a functional proto-Hropkin or a barrel eye, which is just a ton of script too. Or say on sidereal whale with Philania, where if you are using your intuition between midnight and like 4 a.m., that Philania window, it's totally worth it to reel in those ferocious bites because it might actually refresh your intuition. Plus, with Philania, it's again a ton more script. Anyways, I'm talking over that as I get Opabinia here, which is not great, but that is basically kind of the loop for Opabinia. So if I write this down again, something to consider when you're going for legendary fish is think about those phases and think about what you need to be doing in those phases. So with Opabinia, we had the prep phase where we're, getting angler's arts, we're getting flatfish if we can, and going, okay, what do we need for this? What should I have before moving into the next phase, which is the triggering phase for intuition? What do I need? Well, you need at least to be able to double hook, which is 400 GP. So you want to make sure to have that before you start going. you want to make sure you have enough for ambitious lure, a bunch, which is going to be at least 60 per cast. It's 60 GP per cast, and ideally you have enough for chum, which equals about 100 per cast. Now, what I have found and others have supported is in situations where ambitious lure is useful, it is more useful to use ambitious lure than it is cast when low, or sorry, uh, it's more useful to use ambitious lure than chum, or modest lure than chum on uh, fish that benefit from it while you're on low GP. So if you're on, like, say 200 or less, which you should technically not be, but if you're, say, 200, say 400 banked for double hook plus that, like, say 200 workable, if you're under this amount of workable GP, because again, we want to have this for a double hook on Opabinia, so we don't want to be under 400. So we just have this much working. When you're this low, ambitious lure probably is going to be a little bit more useful for you. So you want to make sure that that is something that you're considering as you're, planning out how you're going to attract legendary fish and or trigger the intuition. And then the last phase of this is the actual intuition phase. For this, we want to make sure that we have a way of mooching. Do we have makeshift bait? Do we have patience too? These are all things that you want to consider as you're going into these windows of, is there these resources available to me? And if they are, then you are good to go. Go ahead and try it. But if not, you may just want to pause for a second, because if you don't have the ability to mooch, then you're going to have a really rough time going for Opabinia, which is a mooched fish. If you don't have a way of mooching, then you're not going to be, having a great time going for Opabinia, because you can't mooch all that much. So these are all just things that you consider when going for not just legendary fish, but big fish in general. It's just that usually on legendary fish, as Teodo is mentioning in Twitch chat right now, you have to be able to make these decisions kind of on the fly to really optimize your time. So if you're finding that you're taking a long time to catch a fish that everyone else seems to be catching really quickly, maybe run this thought process through your head, see what it is that's going on, and see if that's actually something that you need to work on improving a bit, and see if you actually are making the right decisions and you're actually fully understanding how you need to optimize and what you need, and are you getting that as often as possible. So as Teodo's putting for Opabinia, from a strategic point of view, based on the numbers, from 452 refresh attempts, that's like 4 times more than I have. I have about 100. It looks like it is potentially a bit of a decision-making process, which is what makes fishing quite fun. That is where the skill in fishing comes in, is being able to make those decisions. If not hooking it lets you get another cast, that is not hooking a functional proto-hopkin off that mooch, means that you can get another cast. Don't hook it. Go for that other cast. But if intuition is ending and you can reel in that hopkin before it falls off, then consider maybe reeling that in to see if you can grab that last second refresh. Fisher's instinct is a trait that I don't think has gotten the most testing done, at least publicly facing testing. So a lot of that information is still kind of being determined. It's going to take a while to really properly test all of these refresh rates, and then even decide, is it possible, like, is it good or bad to actually go and utilize that. But let me double check my notes. Okay. So I pretty much have gone through everything that I wanted to cover for this specific fish train. We covered how to handle straight catch fish, and then mooching fish, and then more intricate mooching fish with Ruby Dragon and its mooch loop, and kind of applied the mooching techniques and straight catch techniques that we had on the previous two fish. And then we all ended that here at Opabinia with the kind of a test and applying all of that information all at once to see if we could actually see if you actually understood it, and kind of broke down how Opabinia worked and those different phases that we had to talk about and kind of go through. So until then, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.